Hello, welcome back to the Luxe Budget. Today I want to talk to you about my experience going to the Wine Spectator Grand Tour that came here at the end of April. So essentially it's just a traveling wine show basically that goes to 3 main cities every year. And then it's kind of like a conference style wine tasting event. So I think tickets are around $250. So it was an expensive event. However, I got to try some of the most amazing wines that there are. Some were very, very expensive, others less so. But I don't think that there are many circumstances where you will have so many concentrated opportunities to try so many different, really well curated styles and executions of wine. So I'm going to take you through the top 5 bottles that I had. The first of which was the Louis Latour Corton Charlemagne Grand Cru, the 2022 vintage, I believe. Let me double check. They give you this really cool book and I just took all my notes in it. So this got a 93 on the Wine Spectator scale. And it was, yes, the 2022 vintage. So this one was honestly a good wine is going to be complex, but it's not going to be too complicated. And I hope you understand the difference in what I'm saying there. So this bottle was way more expensive than I would ever purchase. It was $370 per bottle. James Suckling rated this a 99, and I'm not sure if you know who that is, but he gave a masterclass on wine tasting through like the official masterclass channel. It did have like a vanilla oaky flavor to it, which is not something I typically like, but then it also had a really wide variety of citrus and stone fruit. And it had a very, very long finish, which means that it stayed on your palate for a while after you've spit or you've swallowed. And it just opens up into this really like buttery, golden aftertaste once you've gotten past the initial fruitiness, and when I say fruity, I don't mean too fruity. But it was just like the perfect balance. When I think of champagne, this is now, unfortunately, since it's so expensive, the gold standard. It is made with 100% Chardonnay grapes and sits around like a 14% ABV. And if you ever have an opportunity to try it, highly, highly recommend it. Probably if you're watching this channel and you're with me on the more budgeted side of luxe, then maybe it's not something that's in the budget, at least not for regular sipping. But if you have a special occasion, this bottle is going to be great. Again, it's the Louis Latour Corton Charlemagne Grand Cru from 2022. So the next bottle that I tried was Laurent Perrier Cuvée Rosé, which, as you can imagine, is a sparkling rosé. This rated a 92 on the Wine Spectator scale, and this was a $99 bottle of wine. It was really, and again, I'm just checking my notes here, but it was a really balanced rosé, sparkling rosé. I've gotten a little bit more into them than I have previously. It had a really chalky texture, and it was very, very acidic with fruit on both the nose and the palate. And I'd say it's kind of like a strawberry and peach skin flavor to it. It wasn't quite so juicy as like a full peach. It was really more just like that subtle hint of fruit at the top there. And then once you actually drink it, left on your palate afterwards, it was like a slightly toasty flavor, which is kind of, it's not unheard of when it comes to champagne or sparkling rosé, because once you've fermented it, which you do by adding yeast to the crushed grapes, there's always going to be some leftover yeast that dies. And when you age it with, they say aging it on the lees, it means that it's left in contact with those dead yeast cells, which imparts like a bready flavor to it. And it sounds kind of weird or maybe a little bit gross if you're not familiar with the process, but it results in that flavor of champagne where you're like, it's almost like a toasted bread. It's rich in a way that you wouldn't expect fermented grapes to be rich. So this was surprising because, again, I'm not usually big on rosé, but this has kind of like nudged me more towards understanding that you can't write off an entire varietal unless you have some really fundamental issues with it. So yeah, this was another really, really great bottle coming in at $100. Again, that's Laurent Perrier, the Cuvée Rosé. Delicious. So the next bottle that I had was another champagne. This is all actually champagne and white wine. I know what I like. It is what it is. But funny enough, the event itself was primarily red wine. So if there were 7 aisles that you could walk through, I would say 5 of them were dedicated to red wine, which is interesting. It's kind of an indicator of where people's preferences lie, maybe. But the next bottle that I had was from Domaine Nicolas Foulate. I'll put it in the comments. I'm butchering it. I don't know how it's pronounced. But it's called Palme d'Or, and it is a Brut champagne. The interesting thing about this one is that it's entirely from a 2008 vintage. So it's very old by winemaking standards, at least by my standards. And it was really floral with spice notes on the nose. And then it led into this like almondy, appley flavor. And it was very surprisingly creamy, I think is a good way to put it. It was very mineral on the finish, meaning once I swallowed it, it was very, it had like a texture to it almost, and it was very, very good. This one too was very expensive, and it's really not widely available because of the specific vintage that it is. But it retailed around $200 a bottle, which is, again, very expensive. But if you're ever in the mood for a celebration and you can track this one down, this would be a really great bottle to bring as a gift or to just enjoy for a special occasion. It's also just very like, it's a cool bottle itself. And I don't know if anybody else cares about stuff like that, but I just, it enhances the experience in my opinion. The next bottle that I had was also a Chardonnay, this time not sparkling. Again, I know what I like. I've just made peace with it. This was a 2021 vintage made from 100% Chardonnay grapes, and it came from the Côte d'Or, which is in Burgundy. You know how I feel about my white Burgundies. And it was a really interesting flavor. Let me just take a look at my notes. So Wine Spectator rated this as a 94, which is a very high rating. It's out of 100. And it had like lemon and apple and like a butterscotch, I think is the best way to put it, flavor. There was some minerality there too, and like a complexity that I would almost say like a hint of clove or even like nutmeg or something like that, that just kind of made it a little bit more interesting to drink. It was very easy to go down, but ultimately what was really interesting about this one was the elegant profile that it gave you. So it was just, every sip, every second you had it on your tongue, you kind of noticed something different. And knowing that this one was $150 per bottle, it makes you kind of feel good knowing that you're getting something out of it. There's a complexity there. You can feel good about the experience that you're going to have with this wine. It's really not just about getting a buzz and drinking it down. You can really interact with this wine in a meaningful way. And especially if you're looking for like a great big ticket item gift to give somebody at $150, you can feel pretty good about giving this to somebody for some type of celebratory thing. It's not champagne, but it is a really, really great bottle. And just with how elegant the flavor profile is, if you have any wine friends that are into it, they would just get a real kick out of this. So if you can find this one, please try it out. Okay, so the final bottle and my surprise favorite, it's not that big of a surprise, but I would have guessed it would have been a Chardonnay or a sparkling wine or a champagne, which is sparkling wine, was a Riesling from Trimbach. It's the Trimbach Riesling from Alsace, from Frédéric Emile, and it's a 2017 vintage. This also got a 94 on the Wine Spectator scale, which is very, very high. And the notes that I took down with this were apple and then pear and maybe some like quince or a lighter fruit like that. That's got a little bit of acidity to it, but not too much. This was a dry Riesling, so I think my initial impression of Riesling before I started learning more about wine was that it's always very cloyingly sweet and almost like unpleasant to drink and closer to a Moscato or something that's just leans very heavily onto the sweeter side. But this one was very tart. It was very mineral too, which I really enjoyed. And again, just like the last one, it was a very elegant body. So I told you that there was like apple and pear and quince, but then I also just can't stress enough how like savory the finish was. So when you're drinking a wine, especially if it's going to be on the more expensive side, you want to look for layers. You want to look for things that are interesting. So maybe you smell something that's acidic, and then your initial taste is of a particular kind of fruit. And then as it sits on your palate for a little bit, you start noticing other maybe like warmer flavors or something that's a little bit more like bread or mineral. Like you'll hear people talk about like chalk or flint or things like that. And that sounds weird to describe wine, but it's really talking more about the impact that the wine itself has on your palate and the impressions that the growing and processing methodologies that the vineyards use can have on the impression that you have from your interaction with this wine. And actually, given that this was my favorite and some of the ones that we've discussed already ranged upwards of $300 a bottle, this is about $120 per bottle, which is very expensive. Please don't misunderstand me. But if you were to try to give this as a gift, again, this is going to be a very elegant, involved drinking experience. And if you have somebody in your life that likes wine and appreciates it and is interested specifically in French wine, like your girl, this would be a great gift. This would be a great, just like hosting a wine night and wanting something a little bit special. So yeah, I highly recommend any one of the bottles that I've mentioned here. But in terms of the ones that are a little bit more budget friendly, this one and the one that I just mentioned, and now I'm forgetting it all, but there are some on here that are more expensive, but are on the more affordable side of expensive. You got to pick your battles, right? Sometimes you do. If you're like me, my typical bottle of wine is not going to exceed $30 per bottle because that's just where I've kind of drawn my line. And that might change when I have more of an appreciation. But for now, I feel like that's where I'm capping out in terms of what I'm recognizing and the value that I'm getting versus what I'm spending. But sometimes I want to be a little bit more, maybe I've got a birthday or something coming up and I want to celebrate a little bit more. And sometimes that means spending more money, sometimes it doesn't. But if for you, spending a little bit money makes you just feel like it's more of an occasion, I would highly recommend one of these bottles that I've had. And with some in the $100 to $120 range, I just think this can be a really great experience for you. If you're curious about some higher priced wines or ones that are going to fall a little bit higher on like the wine appreciation scale. These ones are going to be knockout killers. If you try it and you don't like it, let me know, I guess, and we'll see if there's any culpability there. But I would highly recommend any one of these bottles. And if you do try one, or if you have tried one, let me know in the comments because I really like to hear other people's opinions on stuff like this. So thank you for joining me. I hope you have a great day. Cheers.